What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the News Channel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. Preaching politics, it's controversial, it's not easy. Some people say it shouldn't even be done. But we have with us someone today who wrote a book on the topic. Very happy to have with us Clay Stauffer, the pastor of Woodmont Christian Church. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ben, for having me back.
Church there on Hillsborough Road. If you go to the Green Hills Mall, you'll see a beautiful white steeple there. You've written a book, Preaching Politics, Proclaiming Jesus in an Age of Money, Power, and Partisanship. There it is right there, the cover. Why did you write this book?
I wrote the book for a number of reasons. First of all, there's three topics that people say you should never discuss in polite company. That's religion, politics, and money. And so I just decided to write a book on the three subjects. It was the result of some doctoral work that I did at the University of the South, Sewanee. But specifically, I've always been fascinated by the intersection of faith and politics and how people's faith, whether it's Christianity or another faith, how it informs their political views. I've also had a fascination, maybe even an obsession with what is it that makes people liberal or conservative, and how can good, well-meaning people have such different worldviews? And so those are some of the reasons that I went down this road.
Your church is very diverse politically. There's no doubt about it. You have Republicans, you have Democrats. And navigating that as a pastor, I think the easiest thing to do would be not to talk about politics at all.
Correct. And in a town like Nashville, the Bible Belt, there's lots of churches that you would say are politically homogenous. Everybody is on the same page. The minister will maybe even tell you how you are to vote. But at our church, that's not the case. We have political diversity. We have socioeconomic diversity. We have all kinds of just different views and viewpoints. And so I've always been just intrigued by how can we hold a congregation together where people don't agree on things, but give them a place where they can come and have civil dialogue over some of the hot topics that are in the news and that, you know, often tend to divide Christians.
Do people in your congregation know how you would vote?
I don't tell people how I vote because I'm called to be the minister to everybody, and so I don't talk about how I vote. I don't think that would serve me well. It would not be wise. But I am happy to sit down and talk about the issues. In this country, we have a separation of church and state. But what we don't have is a separation of faith and politics. People's faith and their values informs their beliefs and also their politics and where they stand. And so I think that needs to be talked about, and that needs to be put on the table. But no, I do not tell them how I vote, and I don't think I think that's always kind of been my approach, and I want to keep it that way.
And so if you have this politically diverse congregation, every word will be parsed, and they're going to be wanting to see, oh, well, he means this, or he means that. How can you preach a sermon that equally connects with both? I guess a political sermon that equally connects with both.
Yeah, you have to be very careful when it comes to partisanship, and obviously churches and pastors, because we're tax exempt 501c3 institutions, we can't endorse candidates, we can't endorse political parties or positions, but what we can do is we can talk about the issues through the lens of the gospel, through the lens of Jesus Christ, and so that's the way that you approach it. We're called, at least I tell our church, that we're called to be Christians first, and then Republicans or Democrats second. And some people get that backwards, but that's how we should look at politics, is through the lens of the gospel and what we're called to be and do as Christians.
And in the book, you say to just turn your back on politics is not the right thing to do, because there's so many critical issues. So you lay out some of the critical issues at stake and why it's important to at least be talking about these things.
Yes. There are so many issues that divide people. And I believe, and have been watching this for some time, we are evolving into a culture where there's a lack of civility, there's a lack of dialogue. People are afraid to sit down across the table with somebody with whom they disagree and have a calm, debate over why they disagree over the issue, whatever it is. And we can go back throughout the history of the church, the history of Christianity, and we can look at all the different issues where people disagree and they hold passionate disagreements. But I've always been of the mindset that if the church can be a place where people can come together in mutual respect, where they can love each other, and then have conversation over the issues where they disagree. If the church can't do that, then what hope does the culture at large have?
And you talk in here, political differences are tied to money and self-interest. What do you mean by that? Money and self-interest?
Well, a lot of people talk about that people vote their pocketbooks. And so, the general thinking, I think I say in the book, is that if you have a high income, you have a high net worth, you tend to vote Republican. If you don't, you tend to vote Democrat. And that's not necessarily always true. However, issues of money, issues of taxation, issues of how big should the government be, what role should the government play. A mentor of mine once said that the government's called to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. That's fascinating, but sitting down and unpacking that could take some time. But I do think that you can't talk about politics, and Jesus certainly didn't approach discipleship without talking about money, because money is something that everybody has to deal with, and it's certainly something that is present in terms of the issues during an election year.
And would you say Jesus was political?
I think Jesus was political, but I'm not sure that Jesus was political the way that we look at politics today, red, blue, partisan, Tea Party. But I do think that Jesus did have, there was a socio-political nature to Jesus's message. He did challenge the authority system of his day. He did rattle some cages, and ultimately that led to his execution at the hands of the Roman government. So I do think that there was a political nature to Jesus's life and ministry, but I'm not sure that it has the same connotations as when we say political in our culture today.
This notion, again, because I think you're right, about churches often are homogenous when it comes to political thought. In a healthy sort of, and I think you mentioned this in the book, in a healthy society or group gathering of people, you will have people who are liberal and who are conservative. And if it gets too out of balance either way, that could maybe lead to stuff that's not as great. There's something to be found in that middle ground, and maybe it takes the battle or the extremes.
Right.
What do you?
Well, I consider myself a moderate. In fact, I've referred to myself before as a raging moderate. The appendix of this book is actually titled My Journey from the right to the left and back to the center. The center is where I'm comfortable. The center is where I feel like I can be the best pastor, because I can relate to folks that are on the margins. But I'm very worried that the center is losing its voice in our culture today. And I think that's true with both politics and religion. It seems that the extreme positions are the ones that get all of the airtime. They're the ones that get all the the news coverage, and yet a lot of people, most good people are somewhere in the middle, whether it's middle right, middle left, or right in the middle. That's where they are. But many people in our nation today, I think, feel like they don't have a voice, and that the people that are out there, running for office, that may not represent them. And so a lot of people, Christians and non-Christians, are approaching this election very discouraged because they don't feel like they have somebody who speaks for them. And I think that's real. And I've even said that this election might be one where people either stay home or they go and they vote against somebody, as opposed to voting for somebody. And I think that's discouraging. And I think a lot of people feel discouraged, and they don't feel like there's a moderate middle in our country anymore.
And I think the other thing you see is that people too often do congregate with just people of their own thoughts and opinions, and maybe they don't have an opportunity, maybe they're scared, like, as you say, at some point, sit down and have a cup of coffee with somebody they disagree with, because it's just going to devolve into some horrible fight. So no one does. I mean, they follow the people of similar thought on Facebook, they watch news programs, and on both sides, and no one comes together and talks.
Well, there's something very reassuring about surrounding yourself with people that are like you. Birds of a feather flock together. You get around somebody who reaffirms your position, and you say, yes, we must both be right because we both believe this. And so we see that happens a lot. One of the guys that I've spent a lot of time researching is a guy named Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, from NYU School of Business. He was at UVA for a while, and he wrote a book called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Differ Over Politics and Religion. And I think Haidt is somebody who does an excellent job of really getting at the issues of what is it that makes somebody liberal? What is it that makes them conservative? What do those words even mean? And he approaches it from a moral foundation point. In fact, I want to share something, if I could. This is Haidt from his book, The Happiness Hypothesis. He says, my research confirms the perception that liberals are experts in thinking about issues of victimization, equality, autonomy, and the rights of individuals, particularly those of minorities and nonconformists. Conservatives, on the other hand, are experts in thinking about loyalty to the group, respect for authority and tradition, and sacredness. When one side overwhelms the other, the results are likely to be ugly. And I just haven't found anybody that has got his kind of finger on the pulse of what is it that makes somebody liberal or conservative, and how do they get to having the worldview that they do.
And what's so interesting, I guess we have to take a break, and we'll talk about this when we come back, is that both sides claim moral authority. Both sides would claim Jesus was on their side.
Right.
But all right, we'll take a break. We'll come back, continue the discussion. Be back right after this.